The test had no name. Lenora Ashford simply called it the envelope, and in 30 years of running her foundation, she had never once been wrong about what the envelope revealed. She was 61 years old, white-haired before her time, with the kind of posture that came not from privilege but from decades of standing in rooms where people underestimated her. She had built Ashford and Orin Capital from a borrowed desk in a Winnipeg warehouse into one of the largest private foundations in the country. She gave away more money in a single fiscal year than most Canadians would earn in 3 lifetimes. And she had learned slowly, painfully, through every variety of human disappointment, that the truest measure of a person was not what they said they would do with resources. It was what they actually did when no one appeared to be watching. That was the envelope. 4 people, 4 identical sealed envelopes, a single black card with a single instruction typed in small print. This card carries no limit. Use it however you choose. You will not be asked to explain yourself. No cameras they could see, no check-ins, no reporting structure. 30 days and then a quiet conversation over coffee. Lenora had done this 11 times before. She had given the envelope to a hospital administrator who spent every dollar redecorating her own office. She had given it to a man who used it to fund a political campaign no one had asked him to run. She had given it to a woman who, to her genuine credit, had tried to give the card back, saying it made her uncomfortable. And that woman was now the director of Lenora's entire eastern region. The envelope was not about money. It had never been about money. It was about character under conditions of absolute freedom. This time, there were 4. The first was a man named Preston Cole, 44, an urban planner from Vancouver who had been recommended by 2 sitting members of the city's planning board. He was handsome in the way that men who know they are handsome tend to be. Slightly distracted, slightly impatient, as though the current conversation was always just a prologue to a better one happening elsewhere. He took the envelope with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and said, "Is there a preferred category? Like, is there a sector you want us to focus on?" Lenora told him no. There was no preferred category. "Got it," Preston said. "Flexibility, I like that." Within 4 days, he had booked a private villa in Costa Rica for the following month. For himself, his girlfriend, and what the booking confirmation described as an intimate group of 8. The charge was $47,000. Lenora's assistant, a quiet woman named Ruth, who handled the monitoring with the discretion of a Swiss banker, left the printout on Lenora's desk without a word. Lenora read it, set it aside, and said nothing. The second was a woman named Trish Bellamy, a marketing consultant from Calgary who had built a respectable career advising mid-sized nonprofits on brand strategy. She was energetic and articulate and genuinely passionate about her work. She had a gift for framing things. When Lenora handed her the envelope, Trish had placed both hands over her heart and said, "This is so meaningful. I want to use this in a way that really honors your vision." Within the first week, she had paid off her car loan. Within 2 weeks, the card had been used at a spa in Banff, a leather goods store in Toronto, and a restaurant in Montreal where the tasting menu began at $400 per person. Each charge was sandwiched between small donations, 200 here, 500 there, to legitimate organizations, as though the generosity might balance the ledger if anyone looked. Ruth left those printouts on Lenora's desk, too. Lenora read them, set them aside, said nothing. The third was a man named Oliver Strauss, 51, a retired partner from a Bay Street law firm who now described himself as a philanthropic advisor. He came with a reputation and a LinkedIn profile that read like a press release. He spoke in the language of impact metrics and legacy frameworks and sustainable giving ecosystems. When he received the envelope, he had immediately asked if there were tax implications he should be aware of. Oliver spent the first 2 weeks doing nothing at all. Then, in the 3rd week, he used the card to register himself for 3 conferences. One in London, one in New York, one in Palm Springs, all of which happened to take place in locations with excellent golf courses. He also purchased several $1,000s worth of books, which Ruth's research suggested he had sent to his own office, not to any library or school. Lenora read the printouts, set them aside. She was not surprised by any of this. She had been doing this long enough to know that people with resources almost always spent more resources on themselves. It was not malice. It was gravity. You bent toward what was familiar, what was comfortable, what confirmed the story you already told about your own worth. A card with no limit given to someone who already had plenty tended to simply produce more of the same. That was not what she was looking for. What she was looking for, what she had been looking for across 11 rounds and more than 4 years of doing this, was the 1 in 4 who did something she hadn't expected, the one who spent money as though it had weight. as though each dollar carried a question. What does this make possible that wasn't possible before? She had not found that person in this group yet. And then there was the fourth. His name was Emmett Okafor Barnes. He was 42 years old and he worked as a shift supervisor at a courier distribution center just outside of Hamilton, Ontario. He had been recommended, somewhat unusually, not by a board member or a sector colleague, but by a nurse at a community health clinic in the east end of the city. A woman who had told Lenora's team, simply, that she had never met anyone who showed up for other people the way Emmett did. He had no university degree. He drove a 12-year-old pickup truck with a cracked rear windshield he hadn't gotten around to replacing. He had two daughters, Simone, 14, and Clara, 9, whom he was raising on his own since his wife, Adele, had died of ovarian cancer 3 years earlier. When Lenora met him for the first time to offer him the envelope, he had arrived 7 minutes early and apologized for being early. He had sat across from her with his hands folded on the table, not on his phone, and he had listened without interrupting as she explained the parameters. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask?" he said. "Is this it appreciated that? Most people didn't ask." "Does it matter?" she said. He thought about it seriously. "No," he said finally. "I don't think it does." He took the envelope. The first thing Emmett did was nothing for 3 days. Ruth flagged this for Lenora, not with alarm but with a note that said simply, "Card 4, no activity yet." Lenora had noted it and moved on. On the 4th day, the card was used at a pharmacy on Barton Street, $41.60, then nothing for 2 more days. On the 7th day, there was a charge at a hardware store in the East End, $83. Then a charge at a grocery store, not a high-end grocer, but the discount chain that most of the neighborhood used, $112. Lenora looked at the printouts and felt something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't excitement. It was more like the feeling of recognizing a word in a language you'd almost forgotten. She told Ruth to pull fuller detail on the pharmacy charge. The report came back the next morning. The pharmacy was on a block that housed a small transitional housing unit, 12 apartments mostly occupied by women who had left abusive situations, some with children. The charge had been for a combination of prescription medications and over-the-counter supplies, wound care items, infant formula, prenatal vitamins. Emmett had not told Lenora this. He had not filed a report. There was no documentation of intent. He had simply walked into a pharmacy and bought things people needed. Ruth began tracking more carefully. The hardware store per purchase had been lumber, specifically, a quantity consistent with repairing a deck or a set of stairs. A follow-up from Lenora's team found a posting on a neighborhood Facebook group from 2 weeks prior. A 73-year-old man named Gord, a Korean War veteran living alone in the East End, asking if anyone knew a contractor who might fix his front steps for a reasonable rate. He had broken his wrist earlier that year and couldn't manage the repairs himself. The post had 8 sympathetic comments and no offers. Emmett had apparently seen the post, said nothing publicly, and simply gone to fix the stairs. The grocery store charge was harder to trace at first. Then Ruth found a connection through the community health clinic, a single mother of 3 whose benefits had been clawed back during an administrative review, leaving her without grocery money for what turned out to be 11 days. The clinic had posted a quiet call for support in a staff-only channel. Somehow Emmett had seen it. Lenora sat with these reports for a long time. She thought about the word character, how it had been drained of meaning through overuse, how it had become a synonym for vague moral goodness without any particular content. She thought about how people in her world used it constantly, attaching it to anyone who spoke the right language in the right rooms. And she thought about Emmett Okafor Barnes driving his cracked windshield truck to a stranger's house with lumber in the back, because he had seen a Facebook post and thought, someone could fix that. She poured herself a coffee, kept reading. By the end of the 2nd week, the pattern had become undeniable. Emmett had used the card 15 times. The average charge was slightly under $200. The largest single charge was $430, which Ruth traced to a dental clinic in Hamilton's lower city, where a 14-year-old boy, the son of a Congolese refugee family, had been waiting 8 months to have an abscessed tooth properly treated, because the family's provincial coverage had a processing gap. He had taken the boy and his mother to the appointment himself. Ruth had found this through a thank you post, written in French, then translated, that the boy's mother had put on a community forum. She hadn't named Emmett by name. She had called him L'homme au camion gris, the man with the gray truck. Lenora read this and set the paper down very carefully, the way you set down something you don't want to break. She thought about her other 3. She thought about the villa in Costa Rica and the Banff Spa and the Palm Springs golf course. She thought about the way Oliver had asked about tax implications before he'd even opened the envelope. She thought about Trish's small donations, carefully positioned like stage dressing around a much larger performance. She thought about what it meant to have unlimited resources and to spend them the way Emmett was spending them. Not on gestures, not on visibility, not on the kind of giving that required an audience. He was spending the card the way someone spends a Tuesday afternoon, looking around at what needed doing and doing it. She called Ruth into her office. "Does he know we're watching?" she asked. Ruth considered this. "He asked one question," she said. "When he first met you, he asked if it was a test. And what did he do after that?" Ruth paused. Exactly what he would have done if it wasn't. There were things about Emmett that the paper trail couldn't tell her, so Lenora did something she rarely did. She went and found out herself. She drove to Hamilton on a Wednesday morning in late October, when the sky over the escarpment was the particular gray of old wool, and the leaves had mostly come down. She parked a block from the distribution center and waited. She wasn't sure exactly what she was waiting for. At 12:30, Emmett came out of the facility in his orange safety vest and sat on a bench near the parking lot to eat his lunch. A container of rice and something that smelled, even from a distance, like it had been made with actual effort. He ate alone, not looking at his phone, not listening to anything. Just sitting there, eating, watching a group of pigeons negotiate over a dropped piece of bread with what appeared to be some complexity of political dispute. He ate like a man who was not in a hurry, like a man who found the pigeons genuinely interesting. Lenora did not approach him. She drove home, but she thought about him for the rest of the day. She thought about the way he ate his lunch. She thought about the fact that he had 2 daughters he was raising alone, and that he still had enough left over, some surplus of self, to notice an old man's broken steps on Facebook and do something about it. She thought about what Adele must have known about this man before she died. She hoped Adele had known. On the 22nd day, something happened that Lenora had not anticipated. Emmett called her. Not through her assistant. He had her direct number from the initial paperwork, and he used it. She picked up on the second ring. "I'm sorry to call like this," he said. He sounded slightly embarrassed. I wanted to ask a question about the card." "Go ahead," she said. There was a pause. "There's a family on my street. They've been here about 6 months. Came from Syria, 2 parents, 4 kids, all under 12. They're renting, but the landlord just told them he's selling the building. They have 60 days. He paused again.
"I was wondering if this card could be used to help them find a place."
"Not forever. Just a deposit, a few months' rent, somewhere that would actually take a family of 6. Lenora was quiet for a moment. "Emmett," she said, "the card has no limit." "I know," he said. "I just wanted to make sure that was, you know." "Okay, why wouldn't it be okay?" Another pause, shorter this time. "It's a lot of money for someone else's situation. I wanted to check that that was a reasonable use." Lenora set down her pen. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. In the 3 weeks you've had that card, have you spent any of it on yourself?" "A beat. I got groceries once," he said. "For the girls. What else?" "That's it." She asked him where he was buying the groceries for his daughters. He named the discount chain. She asked if Simone and Clara needed anything. Coats, school supplies, anything. There was a longer pause this time. "They're fine," he said, and his voice had shifted just slightly, not defensively, but carefully. The way a person sounds when they are accustomed to managing things on their own and find the question of their own needs slightly unfamiliar territory. "Emmett," she said gently, "you can also buy your daughters winter coats." He laughed, a real laugh, short and surprised. "Yeah," he said, "okay, I'll do that. And yes," she added, "the family on your street." "Absolutely. Use the card." She hung up and sat for a long time in her quiet office, listening to the heating system tick against the cold. The next morning, Ruth's report included a new set of charges. A children's clothing store, just over $200. 2 pairs of winter boots at a shoe store, children's sizes. A deposit placed with a property management company on a 3-bedroom apartment in a building Lenora's team identified as recently renovated and located in a good school district. First and last month's rent totaling $6,400. And then this was the one that stopped her, a charge at a small print shop on King Street East. $87. She asked Ruth to find out what the print shop had been for. The answer came back that afternoon. Emmett had ordered a framed print. The print shop owner, who seemed to know him, had shared in a brief and cheerful exchange with one of Ruth's team that it was a custom job. A quote mounted on wood. The customer had chosen the font carefully, the owner said. Spent a while on it. Lenora's team eventually found the quote through a photo the Syrian family had posted on a community forum, tagging Emmett's name. In the background of the photo, the family standing in their new apartment, the 4 kids lined up in front of a window, you could see the framed print on the wall. It said, "You are not too much. You are exactly enough." Lenora looked at that photograph for a very long time. Then she called Ruth and said, "Set up the coffee meeting, somewhere in Hamilton." His city, not mine. They met at a cafe on James Street North, a neighborhood that had the particular texture of a place, finding its way back to itself. Old brick and new paint, a mural on one wall, the smell of good coffee and wet pavement. Emmett arrived 8 minutes early. He was not wearing his safety vest. He had a jacket that had clearly been ironed. He looked, Lenora thought, like a man who was trying. Not trying to impress, trying to be respectful. There was a difference, and she had learned to feel it. She had coffee. He had coffee. They talked for a while about Hamilton, about the distribution center, about his daughters, about the fact that Simone had started playing bass guitar, and Clara had recently become inexplicably passionate about competitive origami, which Emmett delivered with a perfectly straight face. Then, after a while, Lenora placed a folder on the table. "I want to tell you what I found out about the other 3 people," she said. Emmett looked at the folder but didn't reach for it. "You don't have to," he said. "I know," she said. "I want to." She told him, not in detail but in outline, the villa, the spa, the conferences. She watched his face. He didn't look satisfied. He didn't look contemptuous. He looked mostly as though he were hearing something about the weather in a city he had never visited. Interested, but not invested. "People do what they know," he said after a moment. "Is that it?" she asked. He thought about it. "I think when things have been tight," he said, choosing his words slowly, "you don't forget what it felt like to need something you couldn't get. And so when you have it, when you have more than you need, you think about that. Or I do, anyway." He looked at his coffee. Adele was like that, too. She said money is just solidified time, and time was the one thing she ran out of. He didn't say it dramatically. He said it the way you say true things, which is quietly and without decoration. Lenora felt something she recognized as the sharp edge of grief. Not her own, but the reflected grief of a man sitting across from her, still carrying his wife's way of seeing the world as though it were something he had promised to look after. She opened the folder. Inside was not a summary or a report. It was a letter, 2 pages, single-spaced, with the Ashford and Oren letterhead at the top and her signature at the bottom. The letter was a job offer. Director of Community Impact, Ontario Region. Salary that would not solve all his problems, but would significantly recalibrate them. An office in Hamilton. She had already thought about that. Flexibility for school pickup. A mandate to spend the foundation's money the way he had spent 30 days spending a stranger's money. On the people who needed it most, in the ways they actually needed it, without requiring them to perform their need for an audience. Emmett read the letter. He read it carefully all the way to the end. Then he set it down and looked at the table for a moment. "I'm not qualified for this," he said. "I disagree," Lenora said. "I know what you have," she said quietly. "I've been watching for 30 days. He looked up at her. It was the first time in the conversation that she had seen something break through the careful composure. Not collapse, just open a little, the way a window opens in a warm room. "How did you know?" he asked. "About the things I did, the steps, the groceries." "I didn't tell anyone. The man whose steps you fixed," she said. "Gord," he told everyone. Then he laughed. That same short, surprised laugh from the phone call. "He posted about it on the neighborhood Facebook group," Lenora continued. 3 paragraphs. "He said a man had come by on a Saturday and fixed his steps without being asked and refused to come inside for lunch and didn't give his name." And then Gord wrote. She paused. She had memorized it. "I still don't know who he was. But whoever you are, thank you. My grandkids can visit safely now." Emmett looked at the window. Outside, James Street carried its ordinary afternoon, someone unlocking a bicycle, a delivery truck idling, 2 women sharing an umbrella over a few feet of sidewalk. "I didn't know the grandkids were coming," he said. "I know," Lenora said. "That's the point." He took 2 days to think about the job offer. He asked thoughtful questions by email about the foundation's governance structure, about how decisions were made, about whether his role would have genuine autonomy or would simply be a more prestigious version of executing someone else's priorities. Lenora answered every question directly. On the 3rd day, he called her back. "I want to ask about the Syrian family," he said. "The one I helped with the apartment. They're in a good place, but there are going to be integration costs, language classes, employment supports, things that fall between program gaps. Would this role let me help with that?" Yes, she said, that's exactly what this role is for. Then yes, he said, I'd like to accept. He sounded both resolved and slightly nervous, which Lenora found encouraging. The ones who weren't nervous never lasted. There is a photograph on Emmett's desk in the Hamilton office. A small framed photo, transferred from his home when he moved his life into the new chapter. It shows him and Adele at a lake somewhere in northern Ontario, squinting into summer sunlight, laughing at something off camera. They are young in the photo, pre-children young. The effortless young of people who do not yet know what is coming. On the back, in Adele's handwriting, are 8 words. You always knew how to look after people. He has never told Lenora about the photo, or the 8 words. But she has seen it on his desk. She has been to the Hamilton office. She has sat across from him in meetings. She has watched him fight for families and individuals and small organizations that have no lobbyists and no press contacts, and no one to make the case for them except Emmett, who does it with the particular quiet determination of someone keeping a promise. She has never asked about the photo. She doesn't need to. She already understands that the 8 words on the back of it are true, and that they have been true long before she was in a position to confirm it, and that all she did with the envelope and the black card in 30 days was find a door that was already open and walk through it.